I believe that companies should do business in a way that respected the environment, that championed social justice and worker rights, safety, and was also financially sustainable in the long run. Because, mills are located within communities and they drive jobs, and you want to make sure if you've got a really big paper mill that's employing 500 people that is going to be there year in, year out, day in, day out.
Hey there, business enthusiasts. Welcome to the Chills Podcast, brought to you by All Weather Roof. Because just like a sturdy roof, our conversations are built to last. I'm your host, Brent Loberg, and we're about to dive into the world of business, family, and the moments that give us those exhilarating chills. Ever wonder what keeps successful people inspired? Well, get ready to find out as we chat with some fantastic all-weather customers, partners, vendors, and friends. We'll explore their triumphs, challenges, and maybe even some unexpected secrets. After all, business is not just about numbers. It's about the people behind them. So grab your metaphorical popcorn and join us on this journey. Get ready to be inspired, maybe even get a few chills of your own. This is the Chills Podcast. Let the goosebumps begin. All right. Well, thanks for coming in today, Andrew. Why don't you introduce yourself?
My name's Andrew J. Ramirez. I'm the founder of Cherrywood Partners. For the last 20 years, I've been working at the intersection of sustainable forestry and responsible corporate supply chains.
Okay. What does that mean?
Well, sustainable forestry is a concept that is a multifaceted approach to managing forests that take into account the environmental impact of forestry operations, as well as the social aspects, as well as the long-term financial sustainability. It's a holistic way to look at managing your forest to weigh each of those three criteria equally. So that could be anything from making sure you have sustainable conversion rates for logging, clean water. Water is an ecosystem service for forests. They provide clean water and they filter water through their riparian zones along streams and wetland areas. Conserving biodiversity and protecting endangered species. Logging safety for the workers all through the supply chain at the sawmills and the different paper mills and processing facilities. Making sure they're economically viable, looking at things like recreational and scenic opportunities for hunting, camping, fishing, and then looking at legal tenure and then titled and customary land use for Indigenous and First Nations. For titled and customary land use, there's a lot of sacred sites within our North American forest and forests around the world to Indigenous tribes. So there's quite a few aspects that make a responsible forest, and there's been several different organizations. The Forest Stewardship Council was established in 1993, and they are a organization that promotes sustainable forestry, and they write standards for forests. And then there's landowners choose to voluntarily manage their property to the standards, and then companies can then be audited annually all the way through the supply chain, because the forest product supply chain is really complicated. It's like a spider web.
Sure.
Globally, from the time you have loggers to brokers to paper mills to pulp mills, down through printers, converters, distributors, forest products can change hands, 5 times before you get to the end user. So the supply chain can become long and global real quickly.
So what do you actually do at Cherrywood Partners? How do you help your clients?
So I work with some of the most respected brands that want to demonstrate that their products are sustainably sourced. When you have a company like McDonald's that produces coffee cups, or a company like Starbucks produces 7 billion coffee cups annually.
Oh, wow.
That's a really big environmental impact when you think of paper cups.
Mm-hmm.
So a company like Starbucks would say, well, we want to make sure that our cups are not going to contribute to deforestation or any of those other environmental atrocities associated with, like, destruction of Sumatran tiger habitat or destruction of woodland caribou habitat, making sure that workers in the supply chain are safe. Logging is a very dangerous profession. So there's a lot of things that these brand owners don't want to stand for. So they want to certify that their products are from sustainable sources. So then we would work with the company that makes the cups for Starbucks, and we would audit their factory for looking at purchasing records and looking at sale records, interviewing workers, talking about safety, talking about worker rights. And that goes, every company is audited annually all the way back to the supply. So working backwards from the cup maker, there's a company that would make the paper and the printing. And then back from that, there'd be a pulp mill. And then back from that, there could be loggers. And then anywhere through there could be brokers and distributors. So each of those companies is audited. So it makes a chain of custody all the way back to the sustainable forest. So you can demonstrate where the material came from and whether or not the sustainable forest products were produced.
Okay. Well, you sound very passionate about what you do. How long have you been doing this?
For nearly 20 years, I've been working at the intersection of sustainability and sustainable forestry, where that meets the forest products. So I work with companies that are making paper. I work with logging companies. I work with commercial printers, companies like Lululemon that make yoga mats from sustainable rubber, Sealy Tempur-Pedic mattresses, all these things we don't even think about that are forest products. Anything from the Post-it note to, IKEA. I've worked with, I get to see how all these products are manufactured, couches from IKEA and all these things that, people don't think about, all the forest products that we touch on a daily basis.
Mm-hmm. Oh, very cool. So tell the audience what some of your favorite projects have been and how you've helped design a product that's been more sustainable. You got any favorites?
Well, the Starbucks coffee cup. I'm a daily Starbucks coffee guy, so that was a pretty big deal when that came through. Working with that factory, the Post-it note factory was
Sure.
The Post-it note factory was probably one of the coolest. That is a really interesting factory. They have, as of last year when I was out there, they had 23 different colors in the Post-it note color family. So their input material, they had these giant rolls of paper that they start with, and they had the standard canary yellow, which everybody knows, but then they have the neon pink, the neon green, the neon orange, pink, blue, black, white, striped. It was the coolest factory. It was just so magical to see that. And then it's also cool because I have other clients that buy all their recycled, so they'll cut up their paper and then they'll sell the paper scrap to a different customer of mine that would make construction paper from the Post-it notes, because they repulp that into a paper, and they could make construction paper.
Okay, very cool. Where is that factory?
That factory is in Cynthiana, Kentucky.
Oh, wow. So do you travel a lot for your job?
I have been to 46 states. I've worked in Mexico, Canada, Finland, Germany.
Okay. And then Germany, is this where you said the pen was from?
Yeah, so Faber-Castell's a German pencil maker, and they have factories kind of all over the world. So that's one of the brands. But, if there's a couple of other companies like Dixon Ticonderoga that makes pencils. So they're kind of a more domestic manufacturing. But yeah.
Okay. Yeah, you said, if you don't mind, you said this is made out of walnut?
Yeah.
Okay. That's cool. It's and it's nice, heavy. It looks feels very quality as well.
Well, that's another aspect of sustainability, is that when you look at buying things, when you make an investment in something like a fine pen, it's something that you respect, and you want to, I'm more likely to want to refill the ink rather than, discard the pen. So, that's one aspect of sustainability, is just buying things of higher quality and maintaining them.
Mm-hmm. Very cool. So, are our forests sustainable, and how do we compare to the rest of the world in the U.S. here?
Yeah, so overall, since the 1950s, we've been growing with net forest cover every year since 1950. So every year we're getting more forest than we're cutting down. So some farms are being abandoned and they're reforesting. Just the overall volume, they just don't cut down as many trees as they grow. So we're a net grower as a country as a whole. So that's a great news. But every type of, being such a big country, there's a lot of different factors at play. So areas like North Carolina, you may have, extended urban sprawl and they're going up into forests, or same thing around the Seattle metropolitan area. So there's those things. And then there's some areas of concern where you have areas of high conservation of biodiversity, where you just want to make sure that when you're going to be logging in like the Appalachian forest region, which is Kentucky, Tennessee, North Carolina, that those are internationally recognized areas for high concentration of biodiversity and species, which are very critically important. So we just want to make sure that, when we do take an approach to logging that it's nuanced and it takes into account all the high conservation values that are thoughtful into a forest management plan. So you work with a forester to, identify all those things.
Okay. Very cool. What are some of the other, have you been to any of your favorite forests around the world, or like comparable to like the redwoods or?
Yeah, I think there's a lot of really great forests all over. I mean, every forest is different. I always have a sweet spot in my mind for northern Wisconsin and the beautiful hardwood forests. Back in college, I studied bio-based products management and marketing at the University of Minnesota Twin Cities, and that was basically a fancy name for forest products, lumber and windows and doors and paper and, advanced bio-based materials like PLA-based corn plastics and different things. But at the lumber company, Midwest Hardwood, they're based in Maple Grove, Minnesota. They're a vertically integrated hardwood lumber company with sawmills in Wisconsin and Kentucky and dry kiln facilities. And I would drive to these facilities and, be driving for 4 hours into northern Wisconsin. It's just really amazing to see those northern hardwood forests with the mixed forest with oak trees and maple trees and birch trees, all within the same forest. So all of those species of lumber have different uses and different things. Like maple flooring is something that would be really highly coveted for making basketball court floors. So one of my clients makes all the basketball court floors for the NCAA Final Four.
Oh, really?
It's like the Minneapolis one, all over the country. So, all they do is they make basketball court floors for stadiums.
What's the name of that company?
That one is Connor Sport Court International, and they're up in the Upper Peninsula, Michigan.
Okay.
And that's where the finest, whitest hard maple grows. So,
okay.
All the different regions of the world have different growing attributes and different, just even from northern Wisconsin, northern Michigan to southern Wisconsin, you have different coloring, and the maple gets yellower as you go further south. Or you have, tropical instruments, hardwood, mahoganies, and those types of woods have different sound properties, eucalyptus. So all these species for trees all over the world have different uses.
Okay. Huh. So you said your favorite, you gotta have a soft spot for northern Wisconsin. How does it make you feel when you're driving or you get out and you walk and into a forest like that? Does it bring you back to like a childhood memory, or just how does that make you feel?
Well, that's the thing about forests. Forests are universal. It seems like everybody has a story about a time or an experience where they had a camping trip. I remember for me, it was driving up into northern Minnesota. We loaded our whole family up into the conversion van, and we're towing a boat, and all the way up through the towering tamarack trees of northern Minnesota, all the way up to the headwaters of the Mississippi River. And, that's a moment that really struck awe in me when, as a young child, seeing from an area of the city where there just weren't a lot of trees in St. Paul. So, parts of St. Paul. So it just, to be a kind of a city kid going out to the true wilderness was quite an experience. Yeah.
Okay. You mentioned the white pines in Cloquet, right?
Yeah.
I still am a distance runner, and I ran track and cross country, and we would do a lot of our training on the roads, but I grew up in Duluth and running on some trails up there. But my favorite was running on trails where they had white pines, because they're the long pines, right?
Mm-hmm. Yes.
And it just feels like when you're walking or you're running, it almost feels like you're running on a pillow. And just like the smell of it, it just kind of brings me back to running as a 16-year-old kid all over Duluth.
Yeah, it's a full sensory experience. Actually, in Japan, there's a practice called forest bathing where you can actually go into the forest, and it's actually kind of really helps calm you, and it's actually documented to help with anxiety or alleviating symptoms of depression. Mm-hmm. So there's really a lot of benefits that forests stand for, and I think everybody has that memory they can think back to about forests. So what it really comes down to at Cherrywood Partners is just really safeguarding the world's forests for future generations. That's what it's all about.
Okay. Yeah, I remember my first time camping as a kid with my aunt. There's just something primal, and it was just up in Duluth, but there's just something primal about waking up in a tent in the forest. It just kind of almost feels like you're in your natural environment, you know?
Yeah.
So, all right. So why do sustainable forests matter?
It's never a dull moment. You'd think that this would be pretty much, they'd come up with rules and they'd establish guidelines, but they're always, once they get to one level, after a certain while, we want to raise the bar and we continue to do that.
Mm-hmm.
And it was February 24th, 2022. This was the day that Russia invaded Ukraine.
Okay.
So Russia holds 10% of the world's forests.
Oh, wow.
That's a huge amount of forests.
Yeah.
And in Russia, one of the really important commercial species is Baltic birch, which is a species of birch that is light and very inexpensive and very dimensionally stable. So they like to use Baltic birch pretty much primarily for subflooring for engineered three-strip wood flooring, the top being a decorative face veneer, whether it be oak or maple or walnut, and the under layers are this lower-cost Baltic birch.
Hmm.
Well, when that happened, Russia became known to be, as a state, to be waging war, which then turned all the Russian timber into conflict timber, where the sale of state-owned timber in Russia funds armed conflict in Ukraine.
Okay.
So that threw a huge wrench because the Forest Stewardship Council, the Sustainable Forestry Initiative, and the PEFC all designated any wood coming from Russia or Belarus to be conflict timber. So you talk about throwing an entire supply chain wrench into a very specific species of wood with quite a bit of volume. And there's a lot of other companies that have supply chains that go into Russia with being 10% of the global forest standing. So it's really, these types of things are very much, it's always an evolving target.
Okay. Well, in our business, we actually try to be sustainable as well. So we do commercial roofing, so all flat roofs. And you have your steel structure, and you got insulation on top of that steel structure, and then a roof membrane.
Cool.
And we always try to utilize that existing insulation when we're doing a re-roof. That way we're not filling up the landfills, you're not. Yeah, so we try to use that existing insulation as much as possible. Sometimes there's there's roofs that are ballasted, so everything's held down by heavy washed river rock. We can reuse that washed river rock as well. So we kind of do our part as well.
So what about this concept of albedo and white roofs?
Okay.
Can you talk about that? I know that's a concept that some people talk about in sustainable green building for roof color, black versus white.
Yeah. So we do both. So you got your white membranes are thermoplastic, so they're either made out of PVC or they call it TPO as well. So there's a bunch of different strains, if you will, of white membranes out there. Within the last 10 years, you start hearing about solar. So these white roofs, sometimes people put solar on them to run their buildings off the solar energy. So we do a lot of the white roofs when we're doing solar work like that. But in Minnesota, we heat more than we cool. So black membrane makes more sense as far as energy efficiency. So that's kind of the difference. I mean, you see white membranes more down south where they're not having to heat as much.
Sure.
So that's kind of the big difference. But we do both types in this area.
And then I think also you guys work with, plywoods and structural timber when you're doing roofing and framing?
Yeah, I mean, that's more on the residential side because we don't do shingled roofs, but we do in some of the wall details, some of the curb, like HVAC curb, there is lumber. So,
yeah, I think that, the Home Depot has probably been into this, just as long as everybody, as far as being really committed to sustainability and offering those Forest Stewardship Council certified products. They've got Columbia Forest Products. They make really high quality hardwood plywood. They've got Georgia Pacific, Blue Links, all these really great companies that I've worked with over the years that really make it easy for companies and individuals to make responsible choices just by looking for that Forest Stewardship Council logo or that, all that SFI logo on their forest products.
Yeah. So you started Cirrus. You're one of the founding partners of your company. So give the audience a tidbit of information on entrepreneurship.
Yeah, this was a really interesting thing. So when I was a freshman in college back nearly 20 years ago,
Yeah.
I started my company, Cherrywood Partners. I had this idea
You
that
started as a freshman in college?
right.
Really?
Yeah. And I had worked at some other different companies throughout the time, but I believe that companies should do business in a way that respected the environment, that championed social justice and worker rights, safety, and was also financially sustainable in the long run. Because, mills are located within communities and they drive jobs, and you want to make sure if you've got a really big paper mill that's employing 500 people that it's going to be there year in, year out, day in, day out. So, that was what was the driving force about how I looked at sustainability and, the way I aligned my career and company.
Okay. So you started this as a freshman. You knew right away what you wanted to do.
Yeah.
I was actually working at Starbucks when I was in college.
Yeah.
So, well, that's a pretty neat story. So the name of the podcast is called The Chills. So the chills, we mean like when the hair kind of stands up in the back of your neck or on your arm. So give us an instance within your line of work that kind of gives you those feel good feelings.
I think that at this point in my practice, I get to work with the much larger companies. When I was younger, there's a lot of difference between a logging operation auditing a company like that or a single site paper mill or something like that. So when I get to these really larger companies, international companies that do multinational work or have something really cool, I think one of the coolest story in paper that not a lot of people know about is this recycled paper and corrugated. It's just to see this process. You start with basically discarded trash, old pizza boxes, Amazon boxes, office paper, and these companies collect all of this. They throw it into a big pot of water. They added some de-inking chemicals, and they run this through, and they basically start with garbage, and then they come out on the other side. They got brand new cardboard on the other side, and they can just make products from 100% recycled paper. So I just think that's the coolest, most sustainable green product you could imagine, and that's just the whole story of the forest products industry is, wood and all forest products, they store carbon for their useful life, and it's a renewable product, it's a sustainable product, and it's just to have been able to find a niche that, you can say that you're going to work and improving the livelihoods of the forest and the communities and, protecting those sacred forests for future generations is just really, really good.
Yeah, I like that. It's almost like the circle of life. You're starting with a live tree, and it just keeps kind of getting recycled and recycled.
Yeah.
Very cool. And you can tell you're very passionate about what you do. Is there anything else you'd like to share with the audience about your story or what you do or about the forest?
Well, I think, next month I'm going to the Hallmark greeting card factories. There's a couple of them that I get to visit next month. That's kind of exciting.
Yeah.
It's just I never know what's going to come across my desk around the world, there's about 30,000 certified companies, and all these companies need to be audited annually. Now, obviously, I can't audit all those companies myself, so there's other companies auditing the space, but, it's just, I never know what, I think that over the years I've conducted over 1,300 audits, and I've met people from all walks of life, from every, I work with printers that are located in cities like Portland or Chicago, but then I also get to work with, paper mills in Wisconsin or Maine, or a mill workshop on Long Island, or a lumber distributor in Brooklyn, New York. So I get to, over the course of my career, I've been able to, I talk to about 10 different people, from people that would be, managers to owners of companies, but also people operating forklifts and unloading trucks and operating printing presses and sawmill operators. So I really think that I've been, over the course of my life, I've talked to over 10,000 people from all different walks of life, all different socioeconomic classes, and all over the country. So I just think that that's been quite an experience.
Yeah. Yeah, it's a great story. How do people get in touch with you?
Well, I think the best way to get a hold of me is linkedin.com.
Okay.
Andrew J. Ramirez, founding partner at Cherrywood Partners. That's the best way to get a hold of me.
Yeah.
I also do have a website, cherrywood.partners.
So, but it's sure fun having you on. Thanks for coming in.
Thanks.
Yeah. You're a great interview. You can tell you've done this before.
Thanks.
Yeah. And that's a wrap, folks. A huge thank you to our incredible guests and, of course, All Weather Roof for making this podcast possible. If you enjoyed these conversations as much as we did, don't forget to hit subscribe and share the chills with your fellow business aficionados. Remember, it's not just about business, it's personal, and it's all about the people. Stay inspired, chase those dreams, and let the chills guide you. Till next time, this is Brent, signing off from the Chills Podcast. Catch you on the flip side.